Hello, FIDF family. Today, we bring you a voice from the front lines of the physical and policy war. Ran Bar-Yoshafat is a special combat forces soldier. He'll share his frontline experiences with us and also his unique perspective as someone who, in his non-army life, works as a think tank public diplomacy expert. Ran is a lawyer, earned his MBA, and will soon complete his PhD in history. He is a published author of books and UN policy papers, a former member of the Knesset's legal department, and a TV commentator. Really, underachiever here. We are so thrilled to have Ran with us. Thank you for being with us today, Ran, and please share what your life has been like since October 7th.
Thank you so much, Lara. First of all, I'm very happy to be here because I love the FIDF. I'm an Impact Scholarship alumnus.
Amazing.
So for me, this is being with family.
We love to hear that.
And speaking of family, I'm currently wearing the blazer that I wore yesterday for a party that I had with my wife, which is part of the story for me with the Gaza war. Thursday, October 5th, was my bachelor's party. I was supposed to get married on October 11th, but on Saturday, October 7th, all of a sudden we heard some sirens just as I was going to shul getting my aliyah. And the first time that I heard this, the siren in Jerusalem, I was thinking, is it something serious? Is it not something serious? Should I be concerned? After a few sirens, I saw a colonel that I know with his army uniform driving. And this is on Shabbat during Simchat Torah. He's a religious guy. I was like, okay, I have to go home right now and open my phone and figure out what's happening. I did the same. That's what I did. I went home, I opened my phone, I saw what's happening. I was like, okay, I'm not going to wait until I'm being called. I got on my, basically my army gear, switched to my uniform, packed a short, like a small bag, and drove to base. As I reached to the base area, I saw there a lot of soldiers who just came without even being called, came to base, and immediately they were sent to the south. By a matter of chance, my battalion was asked to wait, and another battalion went before us. I'm a member of a regiment called 551. Usually the people who serve in 551 are ex-Maglan, Duvdevan, Egoz, Sayeret Tzanchanim, Special Forces combat soldiers. So one battalion was heading down south immediately. We were asked to wait a few hours, so there are not going to be too many forces on the ground. And basically that changed a little bit of the story, because the main thing that I had on my mind at that time is that my fiance is not really, she's a new Ola. She made Aliyah from America, and she has no idea what's going on. I'm assuming she understands that I'm drafted in the army, but I need to contact her and ask her what she thinks we should do. We're supposed to get married on a Wednesday. It's now Saturday night. What is happening? How do I take all of these feelings with my thought as an officer? I'm supposed to make sure that my soldiers know what they're supposed to do, get ready for combat. And as I mentioned, one battalion drove south in the beginning of the war, and unfortunately 3 people from that battalion were killed in the process of trying to protect the lives of the Israelis in the towns in the south. I called my wife. I asked her what she thinks, what should we do, and she said, let me think about it. And the next day she said, I think we should get married no matter what. And because of the fact that the IDF, unlike a special army operation, this is still going on, an all-out war, it means that it takes time until you draft all of the soldiers, get all of the reservists into base, even just to sign them on the specific weapons that you need to have, the night goggles, whatever. It takes time. And during that time, you also try to train and prepare yourself for the army mission that you're going to be given. But that enabled me to get married. So my wife said, let's get married. On the 4th day of the war, I left base. I switched my army clothes to my what I was supposed to wear at the wedding, my suit. And I went to this hotel. I had no idea where we were going to get married, because it was obviously not the venue that we had in mind originally. We were supposed to have a very big party with 500 guests and a lot of food and music and whatever. And at the end of the, I don't know if our listeners know what an Israeli wedding looks like. It's usually like a rave. So that wasn't the case. Basically, we had a very, very intimate wedding. Super happy I got married, but the wedding itself was a very modest wedding. So I got into this hotel, which I've never seen before. I asked, where am I supposed to go? I went into this tiny, tiny hall. My wife's family basically was not there. She had one brother. She comes from a Haredi family of 15 siblings she has. So only one was able to make it. Not my whole family, for my family, not everyone were able to make it. Definitely not really something as we planned. We got married, had a great celebration for ourselves, and I got back to base. And then we trained. We trained for a few days. Again, every few days, I was hoping to get a cell phone to call my wife. We were still in Israel at that time. We did some reconnaissance work. We did some planning. We trained to different types of missions. That time was actually, in certain aspects, was the most difficult time because we didn't have all the gear that was needed. And the conditions were actually kind of rough at that time. We slept with a bulletproof vest. It's very important to have a bulletproof vest, but it's not really comfortable to walk with it, and it's definitely not comfortable to sleep with it because I mean, you cannot turn. You can only be in like one very specific position on your side. So we slept in underground tunnels or under bridges with it wasn't the most pleasant conditions, and that was even before we entered Gaza. After 2.5 weeks, the IDF decided that they're gonna start deploying the soldiers into Gaza, and we were the second battalion in our regiment to enter. We began first in Bet Hanun. Because I served in active service during the Second Intifada, so I had a lot of action experience. I've seen combat in active service, and because my first Army Reserves was the Second Lebanon War, I knew what a war looks like. I knew what it is, what are the difficulties of war, and I tried to explain this to the soldiers because sometimes soldiers think it's similar to a mission. That's actually very interesting to see that the people who are from units like my unit, special forces, combat units, they're used to having things organized. And in war, it's never organized. It's always chaos. And when you're at war, usually the main thing that you need to worry about is logistics. Where do you go when you need to use the bathroom? How do you get food? There's no water. There's no electricity in Gaza, especially not in the war area. How do you manage that? I remember after I got out of Gaza, people asked me, how often did you shower? I was like, shower? It was hard to wash my hands. What are you talking about, shower? So I tried to explain this to the soldiers because I think that they were expecting something that was a little bit more organized. What was very difficult for me, I had two main mental difficulties. The first was that for the first time in my life, I had obligation to someone else, which is my wife. And the second is that I got transferred from my position that I had for many, many years. I used to be the commander for the battalion's officers force. So I would lead a group of soldiers into battle. These soldiers were basically the soldiers that are guarding the officer of the battalion. And recently, basically from a year ago, I was asked to be the intelligence officer for another battalion. I was like, okay, so basically it's a war where I know very few people from the battalion, and that's something that's mentally more difficult because one of the things that gives you strength when you go into combat is to know the people next to you. But I tried to share from my experience and explain to the soldiers what's happening, and we got into Bet Hanun, and it was very interesting to see how soldiers change and gain military experience every day that goes by. For instance, when you hear shooting, when you go into war, you keep hearing noises. It's always either a tank is firing, or there's artillery against you, or artillery that we're firing, or an Air Force strike, or people shooting their AK-47 at us, or soldiers shooting their M16. You always hear noise, and it doesn't stop 24/7. And what is interesting to see with the experience of the soldiers is that they are getting to have they're becoming almost apathetic to the noises. It's like they don't care anymore. In the beginning, they're like, what was that? And I was like, don't worry, that's not us. That's 200 yards from here. You should not be concerned, or that's our fire. That's the IDF is shooting here. And after a few weeks, they're like, yeah, someone, a tank just fired next to us, or a rocket fell next to us, and people are almost apathetic about it. It's interesting to see the change. And then after they become too apathetic about it, then you need to tell them, hey, wake up. I'm happy that you're used to it, but you should be very concerned when you're hearing, rockets next to you, because you want to take cover and you want to know if people are shooting at you. That's not us shooting, that's the enemy shooting, and you have to have your helmet on and your bulletproof vest on, and so on and so forth. So it began in Bet Hanun. I think the IDF is going to develop a new form of warfare, because in a nutshell, in warfare until today, I think the main two fields were open warfare and urban warfare. Open warfare is what you usually know from ancient times. You go into a field and you fight, and you still have it when it's country versus country. It's open field, basically. It's fighting in nature. Urban fighting is when you're fighting in a neighborhood, in a city, in a town, in a village, and basically it's different because you're fighting in houses. What we saw in Bet Hanun and later in Bet Lahia and El Tatra and Jibalia, this is all northern Gaza. We basically saw so much ruins that we had to understand how we're going to fight on ruins. It's difficult to walk. This is an example. So it's one thing to walk in mud or to climb a mountain. That's physical difficulties. Okay, it's another thing to say I can barely walk because every step I'm walking on a house that collapsed, and I don't know if there isn't some sort of a bomb that's just waiting to be stepped on, a mine, or if there's someone who has an ambush right next to us in something that looks like a ruin, or it's just a house that collapsed because they had so much explosives on it that when the Israeli Air Force struck another house, it exploded. One thing it surprised me how much it surprised me, I would say, is that every house that I've entered had some sort of either guns or ammunition, anti-Israel propaganda, grenades, mines, explosives, every house. Not one of every house. It was mind-blowing. I remember it happened to me so many times. I would walk into a house and I would see women's shoes, and I would see notebooks with pictures of princesses on them. And I was like, it's really hard. It's a very complex situation. These people are just like us. And then I would put my hand on a bag of diapers, and I was like, that's very solid. And then I would see, oh, it's grenades. They have grenades here. They're putting grenades in diapers. Or one of the things that I can share this because it was published in the media, that we did in Jabalia. There was a teddy bear. Inside the teddy bear, there was a gigantic sniper rifle. So these are my guys who found it. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but the amount of ammunition that we found there was just absurd. So I think that's something that surprised me. We were in Bet Hanun for a couple of weeks. Eventually, we cleared that area. We were pulled out to basically catch some air, take a shower, have 16 hours of rest. And then we went back to another part of northern Gaza. We went to El Tatra and Bet Lahia. We also saw some interesting, I would say, battles there. Basically, terrorists who were trying to come at the IDF. I think we were very successful in our operations there. I cannot elaborate too much about what we did there, but people worked very well with collaboration with the tanks units and with combat engineering and with the Air Force, and were able to do very well. This was actually during the time of the ceasefire. From my perspective, the main reason why we had the ability to get hostages back to Israel was because we hit Hamas so hard that they were basically begging for the IDF to stop so they can have a few days to regroup. Hamas's methodology is, in my perspective, the way I see it, it's a very cowardly way of fighting. They're not really interested in having a face-to-face combat. So they need the days off because that's when they're preparing all of their mines and their bombs, and the way that they're trying to hurt the IDF. They're doing stuff like recording kidnapped people, saying, please come help me, and they attach it to a bomb, and so the IDF will come and they hear Israelis saying, come rescue me, and then they explode. So that's basically their methodology of fighting, which I understand guerrilla warfare, that's how they fight. I know a little bit about military history. What I'm surprised is that they stop there. They just want to hurt us, and then they run away and they hide. And I think that the fact that we were able to work so precise and hit them, even though when they were hiding in the tunnels and hiding in different places in that area, I think that's why they ask for a ceasefire so much. Now that I'm a civilian for almost 3 weeks, it seems very, very different. Um, After that area, we were there for a fairly good time. We went to Jabalia. Jabalia was a lot more intense with the amount of attacks that we had, the amount of face-to-face combat that we had, the fact that people were able to find terrorists from a very close distance. We again saw stuff that were very annoying, like UNRWA bags that were filled with handguns. We saw the most cynical usage of mosques, schools, hospitals, kindergarten, basically every mosque, every school, every kindergarten, every hospital. You don't think you know that it's going to be surrounded by either artillery or mines or bombs, or you're going to have an ambush there. It's not maybe. That's like 100%. It became a joke whenever someone had to go through a mosque. Like, okay, just be careful because it's going to collapse on you, and that's the way it was. Yeah, so that was my experience there. I'm trying to think what else I can share. I want to share something very interesting. I mentioned that I switched my position from leading a group of soldiers um, to my position of being an intelligence officer. And I don't come from intelligence. I come from Maglan, a combat officer leading soldiers into a war. Um, and it was very hard for me to not have my soldiers. I've had soldiers for 8.5 years, basically, that I trained and prepared them. And then, you never know when the war is going to break. And then when broke, basically, they had a different commander, and I was set to do something else, which is very much like the IDF. I'm sorry to say, but it's very Israeli to plan something for 8 years and then at the last minute, okay, you do this, you do that. But I was very, very happy because I met my soldiers several times throughout the war in different places, and I told them, I'm so sorry I'm not with you. I regret not leading you after I trained you for so long. And they're like, what are you talking about? We're the best team in the battalion. Thank you for training us. And I just got a very nice message just before this session. I got a very sweet message from one of my soldiers. I'm going to post it on Facebook. I asked for his permission. And he said that when he saw me several times in Gaza, he said, I'm very happy because I know that I'm prepared to fight. I know what I'm supposed to do because of the way that you trained me. So he knows what it's like he knows warfare. People think that warfare is, you take your gun and you go and you just shoot all day. No, it's carrying a lot of weight. It's walking, it's being very, very quiet. It's not using your flashlight. It's making sure that you know how you sleep, because if you want to sleep, that's okay, but you have to have someone else watching your back. So how do you do that? It's making sure that you know how and when to eat. It's making sure you understand how you go to the bathroom, because there aren't any bathrooms there. So all of that is stuff that you need to prepare. And in addition, the 2% of the actual most interesting things that people eventually added the videos to show that is when you shoot your gun. That is when you tell the radio officer, whatever, please tell the Israeli Air Force to strike here, or when you tell the tank to shoot. So I think I did a good job preparing them. For me, it was very interesting. I shared this with Lara just before we began. I didn't shoot a single bullet throughout this war, which is a unique thing to have. Our regiment officer came to speak with me and a few company officers. And he said, after a certain rank, you're shooting less. That's just the way it is. You're more managing your soldiers than being the guy in the front line. And it's I'm 40. I'm not that young, and this is not my first war, but it is something very interesting to understand that after a certain point in life, my job is to manage the fighting, or to give information about the fighting with the battalion, the battalion officer, and not to be the first soldier in the front of the line, which is interesting. It's also something very hard. I'll try to explain this to you. I'm sure for the people back home who are unable to take part in the actual fighting, it's very frustrating. You feel like you want to do more, but that's also for us on the field. It's to the level of one of our company officers. His company just took down two terrorists. Okay, two terrorists were threatening to explode on his company. They were coming closer, and eventually they took them down. And he meets with the regiment's officer and he says, we want to do more. We're not doing enough. And the regiment officer said, you just took down two terrorists who are about to explode on soldiers. What do you mean you're not doing enough? You know, so many people are not doing half of what you're doing. So yeah, but we want to. So that's, I think, how everyone feels. And I think that's actually, not that I'm happy about the fact that we have a war going on, but I think that is something to be optimistic about, that when people are called, they're there. You feel it. You feel the motivation with everyone. You see how everyone is always asking to do more. I'll share one story and I'll stop with that. After a couple of months, basically, I served from October 7th until almost 3 weeks ago, so like 100 days. They said, okay, let's try to set people, to give them leave, to send them home, to go on leave, to basically catch some air, shower. And it's a question because you cannot send everyone. So let's say you have a team of 20 people. You say, okay, I'll send one or two persons, one or two soldiers. They'll go home. They'll come back the next day, and we'll try to switch them with convoy that come and go out of Gaza. And I met a team that almost everyone there is over the age of 40. There's actually a guy who's in his 50s. He's a physics professor. And I heard them arguing. And what were they arguing about? Everyone was saying, no, you should go. I can stay. I'm fine. I still have energy. No, you have a more important thing to do. You know, you have a wife. No, you have more kids. No, you just started a new job. Everyone was trying to help the other person. So I thought it was amazing. That was a very positive experience for me. War is not fun, but you find fun stuff in the war. And I'll take it to something that's a little bit less serious, if it's okay. And then maybe in the Q&A we can go to something more serious. My wife asked me what I took from Gaza, and I said Mentos and cats. And she said, what? And I said, for some reason, because when you're in Gaza, you're not getting any of the donations. I'm sorry, FIDF, but most of the stuff doesn't reach the people who are actually inside Gaza. You cannot. If they tried to give us pizza once into Gaza. So let's say someone baked pizza, and we're talking about a battalion, so that's a lot of pizza, and you need to move it into the board, like on the border, and then you need a special convoy to guard the pizza until it goes into Gaza, and then we're not all in one area, so you need to divide it. So the pizza basically got there 7 hours after. But for some reason, we did get one thing with a crazy amount of quantity, and that is Mentos, which is not a candy. I have nothing against Mentos, but it's not a candy of my choice. But when you're in Gaza and you're hungry and you want to stay up all night because you need to stay up, so basically that's what you do. You just eat a lot of Mentos. So that's my main thought of Gaza, which was very different, by the way, than the Second Lebanon War, where we had no food. Here we got a lot of food, maybe too much food. I gained like 15 pounds in Gaza. And the second thing is cats. I had so many cats that were next to us in Gaza, which I really felt sorry for them. We tried to give them a lot of our food because it seems like they've seen everything exploded next to them. And one time when I was sleeping in Jabalia, I noticed something that was like on my leg. And you know, when you're sleeping and you feel someone's touching you, you kind of jump. So I jumped and tightened my legs, and there was a cat who was trying to crawl with me. And then you see the cat was like stuck like that. So these are my memories from Gaza. It's not all about bad stuff. I had some not so pleasant experience. I have lost friends that were killed next to me in several occasions. But at the end of the day, you take all sorts of stuff from Gaza. So, but I think I should stop here, maybe, Lara, and open it for Q&A.
Sure. Thank you so much for this really, this insight into what it's like to be in Gaza. You seem very just matter of fact with the whole experience. And I guess my question is, how are you shifting? 3 weeks ago, you were in Gaza. You were needing to be on alert every moment. Then you step out. Now you're a new husband. You're celebrating this peak lifetime moment. And who knows, you could be called back again. Anyway, there's this inflection point in all of Israeli history that's happening right now. And as a student of history and someone who is working in the policy realms and how Israel is perceived, around the world, how are you juggling these different mindsets that you're needing to just sort of pivot between so nimbly. Like, how are you managing that?
That's a really good question. So I'll start by saying something I never thought I'll say so much in my life. I'm not sure I know the answer for that. I can say that. First of all, you're talking to me after 3 weeks of being a civilian. So I had more and more time to adjust. I think I came more prepared to this war than anyone else in my battalion because again, I'm 40. I'm not a young soldier. I was in the second Intifada. I was in the second Lebanon War. I serve in the past 10 years. I've given 1 year out of my life to the army in Army Reserves. I, it's a lot. Literally more than a year in the past decade. And I've been serving in Army Reserves for about 2 decades almost. So um, so I came prepared. I knew what to expect. And I also had 3 weeks to relax. I took my wife to on a vacation to Eilat, or I shouldn't say took my wife. We went on a vacation to Eilat, and we spent the weekend there. And I was like, okay, just relax. And it's getting better every day. However, after I'm saying that, there is a sense of, you're living on limited time. I don't know when I'm going to be called again. I'm sure I'm going to be called again. I'm kind of hoping to be called again because this is my own personal opinion. I think we need to finish the war, and I think that I'm speaking on behalf of every soldier that I've met. Doesn't matter if they were right wing or left wing. They said we need to finish Hamas, and we also need to finish Hezbollah, and nothing else is gonna give us safety. So when you understand that, you do sometimes feel like, well, I don't know how much time I have here on this planet Earth. There were people who were with us, and the next day they were killed, and it happened time and time again. You have friends that I just saw the guy, and then he steps on a mine and explodes, or gets killed from a anti-tank missile, and you're like, whoa, I was just there. Or I had this incident when I was walking with one of the officers. We were walking together at nighttime in Bet Lahia, and all of a sudden we hear this noise, and we both jump with our guns, and apparently half of a building just collapsed, and it collapsed. I don't know. Let's stretch it 50 yards from us. We just walked past it, and then maybe 30 seconds after we left, all of it collapsed where we were. I'm like, wow, okay, if that would have happened, I wouldn't be able to be here and talk to you. I had a gigantic rock that fell on me, like about this size of a rock that fell on me, and luckily it fell on my hand and not on my head. And that's a very short distance. That's like a feet, 1 foot distance between my arm and my head. I was like, okay, if that would have fallen on my head and my hand got bruised, my head with the helmet would not matter. So yeah, you often think, I don't know how much time I have here. It raises a lot of economic questions. Honestly, I lost a tremendous amount of money because of the war, but I also got a slap of proportions. Like I don't care. I'm happy to be alive. So it's a question which I don't have the proper answer, because on one hand I'm trying to really enjoy life right now, and at the same time in the back of my mind I'm like, I'm gonna be called in March, April, May. I don't know. Yeah.
Right. I'm just wondering, as someone who has such a tremendous wealth of combat experience in their background, how do you think of being a how do you think being a soldier after October 7th is different than being a soldier before? Because I think it's fair to say that for a lot of us, this is the first time that Israel's existence truly feels under attack in our lifetimes. Certainly we've heard about the Independence War and 67, but in our lifetimes, to really feel like Israel's existence is being put on the line, that feels like this is the first time in our lifetimes. How is it different being in that war and starting your future family in those circumstances? Like, how is it different?
I think that it's different in the sense that the soldiers really want to continue. Again, that's my experience. I'm not objective. I am very hawkish. I was hoping to have this war many years ago, and people thought I was crazy. And I said, I'm not crazy. I'm not a warmonger. I'm just saying Hamas is getting stronger and stronger. And if we're not going to take them down, it's going to be more and more difficult. And I I hate to say like I told you so, but I did. I told you so. But you're asking what's different. I think that what's different is the motivation of the soldiers. They're like, we want to keep going. And I hear from many of my friends who are saying, look, I really miss my wife, and my wife really misses me. But she says you have to finish a job, otherwise we don't have any Israel. And it's kind of interesting because I actually had these conversations with my wife before we got married. And we had this theoretical discussion, and she said, well, you're always going to go to the Army Reserves. And I said, it depends on the situation. And she said, what if I'm 9 months pregnant? And I said, and what if, we're in this situation, kind of like the one we are now. If I don't go and I don't fight Hamas in Gaza, they're going to come to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and Herzliya and kill everyone there. Like, I don't really have a choice. And I think that that's something that is different after October 7th. And I just want to try to make sure that it's clear. The amount of power, the force that the IDF has compared to Hamas, the IDF is a lot more powerful on one hand. On the other hand, I don't think that since the beginning of modern warfare, even before that, there was ever something that was such a big fortress like Gaza. The amount of tunnels that they have there is ridiculous. We still don't know how many, but I would argue that at least we're talking about 500 miles of tunnels. That's my estimation. I've seen tunnels that were like 2 miles long, two levels. We got to this tunnel where you could go down 12 yards, and then it had a second floor, 50 yards. That's a gigantic. That's more than all of the Israeli underground that we have here together, all of the light rail. If you take all that combined, it's not close to what they have. So you're fighting a gigantic fortress, basically, and that is very, very difficult. But the main reason why it's a security threat for the whole of Israel is because if we live in the Middle East, our neighbors are not Europeans, and that's again how I understand reality. If we do not take them down, then they're not going to be they're not going to be, they're not going to let us be. They're going to attack us again and again and again. They literally said they want to have October 7 again and again and again. So I think that is the main difference. The Israelis are starting to finally understand, okay, we have to, our enemy is not the tunnel. Our enemy is not the balloons that are sending with bombs. Our enemy is Hamas, and it needs to be annihilated, because either we annihilate Hamas or Hamas annihilates us. And I'm very optimistic, by the way, about the ability of the IDF to annihilate it, but it's going to take time, a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of energy, which is why whenever I have friends in America and they're like, what can we give you? It's like, we don't need anything. Hold your breath. This is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. Like, this is not a 200-yard sprint. This is a marathon. It's going to be a year and something, and then we have to wait until we also have our round with Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Right. It's so important what you're saying right now. I think that this idea of listen to your enemy, listen to what they're telling you. They want to do October 7th again. Listen to them. They mean what they say. Because what we're hearing sort of in the discourses around the country or around the world really is, no, they want a Palestinian state. And it's like, no, they don't. They want all of Israel. It's like, oh, no, they want coexistence. No, they don't. Look at that's not what they say they want. And so what you're saying is really to listen to them. And what I would like to ask you now is, given your professional world around policy and law and really being deep in this world, how did what you saw in Gaza, how is what you've seen in Gaza, how will that inform your work, now that you're headed back to your normal life? How will you bring what you learned firsthand in Gaza into your professional sphere?
I lost 3 people that I knew in protective edge operation from Maglan. They were way younger, but I lost them because they were fighting in Gaza in an UNRWA medical center, but it was actually a terrorist base. And I wrote a policy paper about the UN, and I already mentioned there many times the connection between UNRWA and terrorism. And it saddens me, because I think that October 7th did not have to happen if we would have dealt with it in the proper time. But what I saw, again, I hear what the world says. I hear all sorts of conspiracy theories. The IDF did October 7th. October 7th didn't happen. The issue is that Israel is a tiny country. No one in Israel, I don't think you can find a single Israeli that doesn't know someone that was attacked in October 7th. Any single Israeli has a relative, a friend, someone that they know. Um, what I saw was just a joke for if you're trying to do Israel's PR. Like, just look at what's happening here. You have people who are supposed to be working for the United Nations, and they are taking part in this rampage, this terror rampage. You know what they did on October 7th. If you need me to repeat about the rape and the killing and the mutilation and everything they did, these are people who are working for the UN. And then you go into Gaza, and you see weapons in bags that have UNRWA on them. So yeah, it's this scenario. What will it how it will affect my policy? It's just it gives me strength on one hand to know that I do know what I'm talking about. You know, I saw it with my own eyes. It's going to be very hard to convince it differently. I haven't seen it once or twice. I've seen it in every single house I went to. So that's something that I really take into heart. I also know that, you know, it helps you develop a very strong backbone because you know what is happening. I'm on the ground. I see it. I see it. When people say, no, that's not what happens. Like, I know what happened. I was there. I'm the one who saw the UNRWA bag with the weapons in it. I'm the one who saw the sniper rifle inside a teddy bear. I'm the one who saw how people are hiding behind children to attack us. Like, I saw it. So don't tell me that that didn't happen. But I don't have an answer to how we should go about it and try to convince the world, because the way I see it, it is so obvious to me that when people don't want to see it, it's like they really don't want to hear. They don't want to listen. We had people with GoPro cameras. You can really see what's happening. And by the way, oddly enough, Hamas also have their GoPro cameras. So they also literally expose what it is that they do. They take pride in it. They are rejoiceful about the fact that they're being so barbaric in the way that they butchered innocent people. So how will that affect my research and my policy making? I'm not sure. Again, I'm sorry for saying this again, but I do not know became my most common phrase since October 7th. I do want to say that I think it did shift my perspective on, not me, everyone that was with me in Gaza. Every single person said, I'm not sure I want to continue with my career the way it is. I think I need to do something more for the state of Israel because I'm very concerned for our future. Everyone. So how will that affect my policy making? I'm not sure, but it definitely will affect. I don't have a better answer to give you than just my honest feeling right now.
No, but that's a good segue because, you know, I think we're a good place to close would be having been there, having heard the critics, the armchair critics around the world, talking about the IDF, maligning them in every which way, and you being a soldier who didn't fire a single shot in Gaza, and having really seen the ethics of the IDF at work. You know, what would you tell people? What do you think is that number one message that soldiers feel, I may need to switch gears here because this message is not getting out? And if you want to share that with our audience, you know, I think that would be a good place to wrap up.
I'll share one story that happened to us from the beginning of the war. We had this conversation in Bet Hanun, in Bet Lahia, in Latatra, in Al-Jibali, all of northern Gaza. The discussion is, are you allowed to use the food that the Arabs have there? Now, just so we'll be clear, this is food, sometimes from UNRWA. We're talking about flour. We're talking about oil. We're not talking about burgers. And the question is, are you allowed to use it? Keep in mind that the house that we're staying at, we're going to explode it soon. Okay, it's not going to stay there because the house is a danger to the IDF troopers that are going to go after us. It's in a certain location that you know it cannot stay there. And we're there for a few hours. It was a discussion. Some say, no, you're not allowed to use the enemy food. It doesn't matter if you're going to explode it. It doesn't matter if it's going to go to waste because you don't want to be a person that loots. Another soldier said, with all due respect, I'm tired of eating Mentos and tuna cans. Like I need some bread. I need something else until the convoy will give this to us. I don't know. I just want to add a little bit of olive oil. What does it matter? This olive oil is not going to be used by anyone in the future. I can tell you what the answer was at the end of the day. But that is a discussion, okay, that you have in the middle of warfare. And just to remind you again, once you're there 24/7, you hear something, and then you're having a discussion. We're allowed to use the olive oil that I found in the house of a terrorist that we know took part in October 7th, that has grenades all over the house, and we need to detonate it so it doesn't risk other soldiers. Can I use it? The fact that we have this discussion is just, it's crazy to me later to hear people saying, oh, the IDF is killing in disproportionate amount, using disproportionate amount of force. Like, what are you talking about? In what planet do you live that we're using disproportionate amount of force, that we're killing innocent people? Are you serious? We don't want to use olive oil because we don't want to look at ourselves in a mirror and know that we took someone else's food, even if that person is a terrorist, and even if this olive oil is about to be exploded because the house is filled with grenades and explosives. And the world is saying that we're killing innocent people. I'm sorry, it's a joke. It's just there's two different planets of what's happening and what is it people say. And fine, yes, sure, I'm sure I can find not one, not two, maybe 10 soldiers who have misbehaved. That doesn't mean anything. That's not the rule. That's not that's not the norm. That's not how the IDF acts. That's like, okay, fine, I can find people who misbehave anywhere. But that was the discussion in many places. And then to go back to civilian life and to hear Israel is killing innocent people. Really? That's what we're doing? Okay, fine, sure. You're right. Okay. Not connected to what I've done in the past 100 days. So.
Amazing. Thank you so, so much for that incredible insight. And those are the sorts of examples that are really actionable. You can take that story, and when you're having that conversation in the kitchen of your office, then it's something you can share as a tangible example of the level of thought and of how deliberate the IDF is and thoughtful about every decision. And it's really incredible. Thank you for that. And thank you for sharing your experience with us. And on behalf of the entire FIDF family, Mazal Tov.
Thank you so much.
On your
Thank you so
recent
much.
wedding.
Yeah, and we're flying to the United States, so I hope to see some of the FIDF people in person while I'm there. Yeah.
We would love that. The whole family can't wait to see you. Thank you so much, Ran. Am Yisrael Chai forever.